Jake had always dreamed of being a cowboy. Growing up on the wide-open plains, he imagined himself riding horses across endless fields, working hard on a ranch and making a name for himself. Now at 24, he had made his way to a small village at the edge of Apache land. The village was quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and the rhythms of life followed the seasons. Jake rented a small cabin near the village, with a wide porch where he could sit in the evenings and watch the sun dip below the horizon. His days were spent working the land, fixing fences, and taking care of his horses. The people in the village were friendly enough, but there was something about the Apache people that made Jake feel like an outsider. He had heard stories about the Apache's strength and their deep connection to the land, but he never paid them much attention, until one day, everything changed. It was early one morning when Jake first saw her. He had just finished his breakfast and was heading out to tend to his horses when he noticed a group of villagers gathered in a small circle. Their voices were low, murmuring to each other, and their eyes were all focused on one person. Jake couldn't see her clearly from the distance, but there was something about the way they looked that caught his attention. It was as if they were looking at something or someone they didn't quite understand. Curious, Jake walked closer, his boots crunching on the gravel as he approached. He tried to stay out of sight, but his presence was quickly noticed. The villagers looked at him for a brief moment before returning their gaze to the center of their circle. There, standing with quiet confidence, was a woman. She was tall, taller than most of the men in the village, and her skin had the warm brown hue of someone who had spent her life under the sun. She was dressed in traditional Apache clothing, loose-fitting garments with intricate beadwork and feathers adorning her hair. But what stood out the most was the aura around her, a sense of quiet power and grace that made everyone else seem smaller in comparison. Jake's eyes widened. He couldn't take his gaze off her. She wasn't just tall. She was different. There was a presence about her that made him feel like he was seeing something rare, something he didn't quite understand but was drawn to nonetheless. The villagers didn't seem to share his awe. In fact, they looked afraid. Jake overheard one of them whisper, "She's not human," before the voice trailed off into the quiet. The others nodded, murmuring in agreement. It was then that Jake realized there was more to this woman than met the eye. She wasn't just an Apache woman. She was something extraordinary. Jake's heart raced as the woman turned and caught his eye. For a brief moment, their gazes locked, and Jake felt a strange chill run down his spine. He had never believed in things like fate or destiny, but in that moment it was as if time itself had paused, just long enough for him to realize that his life was about to change forever. She didn't speak, but there was something in her expression that told Jake she knew exactly what he was thinking. Her eyes were calm, but they held a depth that seemed to see straight through him, as if she could read his thoughts. The villagers, still standing around her, seemed to shift uncomfortably, their whispers growing louder. But the woman, unfazed by their gaze or their fear, simply turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Jake stood there for a moment, frozen in place. He had heard rumors of the Apache's powerful women, warriors and healers with abilities beyond those of ordinary people, but he hadn't expected to encounter one so soon. What was it about her that made everyone so uneasy? Was she truly different, as the villagers said? And why did Jake feel an undeniable pull toward her? A sense that there was something important about her that he needed to understand. The day went on, but Jake couldn't shake the image of her from his mind. He couldn't help but wonder who she was and what had brought her to the village. There was a mysterious air about her, something almost otherworldly, and Jake was determined to learn more. The following days were spent in a blur of work, but Jake's thoughts kept returning to the woman. He tried to ask around, hoping someone would give him answers, but the villagers were tight-lipped. Whenever he mentioned her name, they would look away or change the subject. It was as if talking about her was forbidden, a subject best left alone. One afternoon, as Jake was walking through the village to buy supplies, he saw her again. This time she was standing by the edge of the river, her long hair blowing gently in the wind. Her gaze was distant, as if she were lost in thought, staring out across the water. Jake hesitated, unsure if he should approach her, but something inside him urged him to do so. So with a deep breath, he walked toward her. When she saw him, her face softened. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet recognition, as though she had been expecting him. Jake stopped a few feet away, feeling both nervous and drawn to her at the same time. "Hello?" Jake said, his voice a little uncertain. The woman nodded. "Hello," she replied, her voice calm and steady. It was the first time she had spoken to him, and Jake couldn't help but notice how her words seemed to echo in his chest, resonating deeply within him. "I'm Jake," he said, offering a hand. "I'm new here. I've seen you around and, well, I just wanted to introduce myself." She looked at his hand for a moment before giving a small smile. "I am Tala," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "You are not from here." Jake nodded. "No, I'm from a ranch out west. Just came to settle here for a while." Tala looked at him for a long moment as if weighing something in her mind. Then, without warning, she asked, "Why do you stare at me?" Jake felt his cheeks flush. He wasn't sure how to answer. I don't know. There's something about you that's different. Something I can't quite explain." Tala's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Maybe understanding, maybe amusement. "I am different, and you should not fear it," she said simply. Jake stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. There was so much he didn't understand, but for the first time in his life, he felt like he wanted to know more. Tala was unlike anyone he had ever met, and somehow he knew that meeting her was only the beginning of something much larger than he could ever imagine. The wind picked up again, rustling the leaves around them. Jake and Tala stood in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Jake didn't know what would happen next, but one thing was certain. He would not be able to forget the moment he first saw her, and that was just the beginning. Jake couldn't shake the image of Tala from his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her standing by the river, her eyes so calm yet full of mystery. He spent the next few days trying to focus on his work, tending to his horses, fixing the fences, and taking care of his small ranch. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't escape the pull he felt toward her. It wasn't just her beauty that had caught his attention. There was something else, something deeper. It was as if she held a secret, a power that seemed to radiate from her every movement. The way she stood so tall, so sure of herself, made Jake feel both awestruck and intimidated. And it wasn't just him. The villagers were afraid of her. He could see it in the way they avoided her gaze, the way they whispered when they thought she wasn't listening. But none of that seemed to matter to Tala. She walked through the village with the same quiet strength, as if she knew exactly who she was and didn't need anyone else's approval. Jake had heard the whispers, the villagers saying she wasn't human, that she was something else, something beyond their understanding. But he didn't believe them. He couldn't. Tala wasn't just a myth or some strange creature. She was a woman, and there was a story behind her, a story Jake was determined to learn. One evening, after a long day of work, Jake decided to take a walk into the village. It was a peaceful evening, the kind where the air felt crisp and the stars were just starting to appear in the sky. As he made his way down the dirt road, he saw a familiar figure standing near the edge of the village, just outside the small gathering of homes. It was Tala, her back turned to him as she gazed at the stars. Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had been hoping to see her again, but he hadn't expected to find her so soon. He hesitated for a moment, unsure whether he should approach her. But something inside him urged him to move forward. So with quiet steps he walked toward her. When Tala heard his footsteps, she turned around. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes, those dark, soulful eyes, met his with an intensity that made Jake's breath catch in his throat. "Jake," she said softly, her voice as calm as it had been the first time they spoke. "You are far from your home tonight." Jake smiled nervously, feeling the weight of her gaze on him. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd take a walk," he said, trying to sound casual. Tala nodded, her expression still unreadable. "The stars are beautiful tonight," she said, her gaze shifting back to the sky. Jake followed her eyes and glanced up at the sky. The stars were bright, their light shimmering across the dark canvas above. It was a peaceful sight, and for a moment, Jake forgot about everything else. The villagers' whispers, the strange feeling that had settled in his chest whenever he was near Tala. All he could see were the stars, shining like tiny diamonds in the night. "They are," Jake agreed, his voice quieter now. They stood there in silence for a while, both lost in their thoughts. The only sound was the soft rustling of the wind through the trees and the occasional distant cry of an owl. Jake wasn't sure what to say. He had so many questions, but he didn't want to push her. There was something about Tala that made him want to tread carefully, as if any wrong word could shatter the delicate balance between them. Finally, Tala spoke again, her voice breaking the silence. "You wonder about me," she said, her words almost like a statement, as if she had read his mind. Jake's heart raced. He hadn't meant to give anything away, but it seemed Tala had sensed his curiosity. He nodded slowly. "I do," he admitted. "I can't help it. There's something about you, something different. I've never met anyone like you." Tala looked at him for a moment, her expression softening just slightly. "I am different," she said quietly, as if speaking to herself. "But I am still human." Jake blinked, confused. "Human?" he echoed. "But the villagers? The villagers fear what they do not understand." Tala interrupted gently. "They do not know me, and so they whisper. They say I am not human because I am not like them, but I am. I was born to this land just as they were. My blood is as red as theirs." Jake swallowed, unsure how to respond. He had heard the villagers' whispers. He had seen the way they looked at Tala with fear and suspicion. But hearing her speak so plainly, so confidently, made him question everything he had believed. "So, why do they think you're not human?" he asked, his voice soft. Tala's eyes darkened slightly, and for a moment Jake thought he saw a flicker of something hidden deep inside her. A pain, maybe, or a memory she wasn't ready to share. But then it was gone, and she looked at him again, her expression unreadable. "It is because of what I can do," she said slowly, her voice steady. "The power I have. It is not something I asked for, but it is a part of who I am. And it is what makes the villagers afraid." Jake frowned. "Power? What kind of power?" Tala didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped closer to him, her gaze unwavering. "You saw it, didn't you?" she asked. "When you first saw me, you saw the way I stood taller than the others. The way the ground seemed to tremble beneath me. You felt it, didn't you?" Jake nodded, his heart pounding. "Yes, I did." Tala sighed, her breath a soft whisper in the night air. "I was chosen," she said quietly. "Chosen by the spirits of the land. They made me what I am, and when the time comes, I will be called upon to protect my people." Jake's mind raced. Protect them from what? Tala's eyes darkened again, and this time the pain was clear. "From the things they cannot see," she said. "The things that lurk in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike. The enemies my people cannot fight. I am their protector." Jake stood there in stunned silence. He had heard stories of warriors, of powerful protectors, but never anything like this. Tala was not just a woman. She was something more, something beyond the ordinary. The wind picked up, sending a chill through the air, but Jake didn't move. He couldn't. He was captivated by Tala's words, by the mystery that surrounded her. There was so much more to her than he had ever imagined, and he knew deep down that he had only scratched the surface. Tala looked at him again, her eyes searching his face. "You are not afraid of me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake shook his head. "No, I'm not afraid." Tala smiled, though it was a sad smile, as if she had hoped for this answer but never expected it. "Then you are different too," she said softly. The moment hung between them, heavy and charged with unspoken understanding. Jake didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. His life had changed forever. And whatever Tala's role in that change was, he knew he would be a part of it. As the stars above them twinkled, Jake made a silent vow. He would stand by her no matter what. Jake spent the next few days thinking about everything Tala had said. The mystery surrounding her grew with each passing moment, and the more he tried to make sense of it, the more he realized he didn't understand much at all. But there was one thing he was certain about. Tala was no ordinary woman. She was different, and the pull he felt toward her, the deep curiosity that stirred within him, couldn't be ignored. He couldn't stop thinking about their conversation by the river, about the power she spoke of, about the responsibility she carried on her shoulders. Tala had been chosen by the spirits, given a power that not even the villagers fully understood. Jake had heard rumors about the Apache's connection to the land and their spiritual beliefs, but hearing it from Tala herself made it all too real. One afternoon, Jake found himself walking through the village again, hoping to see her. The day was warm and the air had a certain stillness to it, as though the world itself was holding its breath. As he passed the village square, he saw her, Tala, standing, near the small fire pit just outside the village. She was alone, as usual, her posture relaxed but somehow tense, as if waiting for something. Jake hesitated for a moment before approaching her. He didn't want to seem like he was intruding, but at the same time he couldn't resist the urge to talk to her again. He walked up slowly, trying to seem casual. "You're out here alone," Jake said, his voice a little quieter than he intended. Tala looked up, her expression unreadable, but her eyes softened when she saw him. "Yes," she said simply. "I often come here to think. It is peaceful." Jake nodded. He wasn't sure what to say next, so he simply stood beside her for a moment, feeling the warmth of the fire and the quiet of the village around them. The fire crackled softly, the only sound breaking the silence between them. Finally, Jake spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about being chosen by the spirits." Tala turned her head slightly, as if considering him. "You want to understand," she said, her voice calm. "But it is not something easily understood." Jake nodded. "I know. But I want to understand. I don't want to be afraid of you." Tala smiled faintly. "You are not afraid," she said. "That is why you are here." Jake wasn't sure if he understood what she meant, but he didn't question her. He simply stayed quiet for a moment, letting the crackling fire fill the space between them. "I've heard stories," Jake said eventually, "about the Apache, about the warriors, the protectors, but I didn't know any of it was true. I didn't know there were people like you." Tala's gaze turned distant, and for a moment Jake thought she wasn't going to respond. But then she spoke, her voice soft and almost sad. "I am not like the others. I am something different." Jake looked at her, confused. "What do you mean? You said you were chosen." Tala nodded, her eyes still focused on the flames. "Yes, but it is not something that can be easily explained. I did not ask for this power. It was given to me. And with it comes great responsibility." Jake was silent for a moment, trying to process her words. "But what kind of responsibility?" he asked. "What does it mean to be chosen?" Tala's eyes flickered as if she was choosing her words carefully. "It means I must protect my people. I must guard them from dangers they cannot see, from forces that threaten the balance of this land. I must remain strong, even when I feel weak, and I must carry the weight of their fears and their doubts." Jake frowned. "But you don't want to do this?" he asked, his voice full of concern. Tala looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I do not have a choice," she said quietly. "This power is not a gift, it is a burden. But I accepted it because it is my duty. I am the one who must stand between my people and the darkness that lurks beyond." Jake felt a pang of sympathy for her. He couldn't imagine what it must be like to carry such a burden, to be chosen for something so important and so dangerous. "You're alone in this," he said softly. Tala's gaze softened, and for the first time Jake saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "Yes," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I am alone. But I have always been alone. The spirits chose me because I am strong enough to bear this responsibility. The others, they do not understand." Jake felt a surge of empathy for her. He couldn't imagine how it must feel to be so different, to carry a power that made others fear you. He had seen the way the villagers looked at her, how they whispered behind her back and avoided making eye contact. It wasn't fair. Tala wasn't a monster. She was a woman just like any other, with a role to play that she hadn't asked for. "I don't think you're a monster," Jake said quietly, looking directly into her eyes. "I think you're a hero." Tala's eyes widened slightly and she was silent for a moment. Then her lips curled into a small, bittersweet smile. "Thank you," she said softly. "But I am no hero. I am just a servant to my people, a protector of a land that does not belong to me." Jake wasn't sure what to say to that. He didn't fully understand everything Tala had told him, but he understood that she was more than just the rumors the villagers spread. She was more than the whispers of not human or unnatural. She was a person, a woman with a strength and a duty that most people would never comprehend. They stood there in silence for a while, watching the fire crackle and dance. The quiet evening seemed to stretch on forever, and Jake felt an odd sense of peace settle over him. In that moment, he wasn't thinking about the mystery of Tala's power or the whispers of the villagers. He was simply standing beside her, sharing a quiet moment. Tala broke the silence again, her voice soft. "I have to go soon," she said. "There is much to be done. The spirits are restless, I can feel it." Jake nodded, not wanting to ask her to stay when she had such an important role to play. "I understand," he said quietly. "But if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm here." Tala looked at him, her eyes searching his face for a moment before she nodded slowly. "Thank you, Jake. You are kind, and that is rare in this world." As she turned to leave, Jake watched her walk away, the firelight casting long shadows on the ground. He didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. His life was intertwined with hers now, whether he understood it fully or not. And whatever came next, he would be there, standing beside her. The days that followed felt heavy, as if the air itself was charged with an energy Jake couldn't understand. The quiet village had always seemed peaceful, but now there was an underlying tension. Jake couldn't help but notice the way the villagers watched him and Tala whenever they crossed paths. Their whispers grew more frequent and their eyes filled with a mix of fear and curiosity. But he didn't care about the villagers' opinions anymore. He had learned that Tala was more than they had ever given her credit for. One evening, as Jake worked on his ranch, he felt a change in the wind. It was subtle at first, just a slight shift in the air, a sense that something was coming. He paused for a moment, looking toward the mountains in the distance. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the valley, but something felt different this time. A faint rumble echoed in the distance, almost like thunder, but the sky was clear. He frowned and shook his head. It couldn't be a storm. He had seen storms before, and this wasn't like any of them. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. He made his way to the village, hoping to find answers. As he entered the village square, he spotted Tala near the edge of the gathering place, standing alone. She was looking up at the sky, her face expressionless but with an air of quiet urgency. Her eyes were focused, and Jake could tell she was sensing something that he couldn't. He approached her slowly, not wanting to disturb her concentration. "Tala," he called softly. She turned, her expression softening when she saw him. "Jake," she said, her voice low and calm. "You feel it too, don't you?" Jake nodded. "I don't know what it is, but something's wrong. The air feels different." Tala's eyes darkened. "The spirits are restless," she said quietly. "Something is coming. Something that will test us all." Jake's heart skipped a beat. He had heard Tala mention the spirits before, but this time her tone was different. There was a weight to her words that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He stepped closer to her. "What do you mean? What's coming?" Tala glanced around, making sure no one else was listening before she spoke. "There are forces out there, ancient, dark forces that threaten my people. I have been chosen to protect them, but the time is approaching when I will have to face them. I cannot do it alone." Jake swallowed, his thoughts racing. He had known that Tala was different, that she had some kind of power, but he hadn't realized just how serious her role was. He had no idea what kind of forces she was talking about, but he knew one thing for sure. Tala wasn't just protecting the village from a rival tribe. There was something far greater, far darker, lurking just beyond the horizon. "You don't have to face it alone," Jake said, his voice steady. "I'll help you. I don't know what's coming, but I won't let you face it by yourself." Tala studied him for a long moment, her gaze intense. "You do not understand, Jake," she said softly. "This is not something that can be fought with strength alone. It is not something that can be defeated with weapons or courage. This is a battle of the spirit." Jake's mind raced. He didn't fully understand what she meant, but he was certain about one thing. He couldn't leave her to face whatever was coming on her own. He had already seen the strength within her, and now he was beginning to understand the weight of the responsibility she carried. "I don't know what kind of battle you're talking about," Jake said slowly, "but I know I'll be with you, whatever it takes." Tala's eyes softened, and for a brief moment Jake saw something in her expression that resembled gratitude, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. "You are brave," she said quietly, "but this will not be easy. You may not understand the full extent of what we are about to face." Jake nodded. "I don't need to understand everything. I just need to be by your side." Tala studied him for a long time, her gaze searching his face as though weighing his sincerity. Then, without a word, she turned and began walking toward the edge of the village. Jake followed her, his heart beating faster now, his mind racing with questions and fears he couldn't yet put into words. They reached a clearing near the forest, where the land stretched out wide before them. Tala stopped and turned to face Jake. The setting sun cast long shadows, and for a brief moment, Jake could have sworn the world seemed to hold its breath. Tala closed her eyes for a moment, her hands resting at her sides. Then with a deep breath, she began to speak in a language Jake didn't understand. Her words were soft and melodic, yet powerful, carrying a rhythm that seemed to echo through the earth itself. As she spoke, the wind picked up, swirling around them as though responding to her call. The air grew colder, and Jake could feel a strange energy in the atmosphere, a presence as if something had been awakened. He stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. "Tala?" he asked softly, unsure if she could hear him, but she didn't answer. Instead, she continued speaking, her voice growing stronger with each passing moment. The ground beneath Jake's feet seemed to tremble, and the trees around them swayed as though caught in an unseen force. Then, suddenly, there was silence. The wind stopped. The earth stilled. Tala opened her eyes, and Jake saw a different light in them, an intensity that took him by surprise. It was as if she had become something else entirely, something beyond human. "The spirits have spoken," she said, her voice low but firm. "The time has come. The darkness I have warned you about is here." Jake felt a chill run down his spine, and for the first time since meeting Tala, he felt a sense of fear. Not fear of her, but fear of what was coming. Fear of the unknown force that threatened to consume everything in its path. "What do we do now?" Jake asked, his voice steady despite the fear rising within him. Tala turned toward him, her expression softening. "Now we prepare. I must face this darkness, but I cannot do it alone. I will need you by my side. You may not understand what is happening, but I need you to trust me." Jake's heart raced. He had trusted her from the moment they met, and now more than ever he knew he couldn't back down. Whatever this darkness was, he would stand beside her, ready to fight with everything he had. "I'm with you," Jake said firmly, his voice filled with resolve. "I'll do whatever it takes." Tala's eyes flickered with something, relief, perhaps, or hope. "Then let us prepare," she said softly. Together, they turned toward the path that led deeper into the forest, where the spirits awaited, and the battle that would determine the fate of her people was about to unfold. The journey into the forest felt different than it had before. Jake could sense the change in the air, a heaviness that seemed to hang around them as if nature itself was holding its breath. Tala walked ahead, her movements purposeful, every step in sync with the pulse of the earth beneath her feet. Jake followed, staying close, his thoughts racing. He had seen the power Tala held within her, and he had heard the ancient warning she had spoken to him. But now, as they ventured deeper into the forest, that fear, the one he had tried to push aside, had returned. Something dark was coming, and no matter how brave he tried to be, he couldn't deny the uncertainty that gnawed at him. Tala, sensing his unease, turned to him as they walked. "Stay close, Jake," she said quietly, her voice steady but tinged with a seriousness he hadn't heard before. "We are not alone here." Jake nodded, his eyes scanning the shadows of the trees around them. The forest had always been quiet, almost too quiet, but now there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, made Jake's heart race. They reached a clearing surrounded by towering trees, their branches stretching high above. The moonlight filtered through the canopy, casting an eerie glow on the ground. Tala stopped at the center of the clearing and turned to face Jake. "This is where it will begin," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the space in front of them. "The darkness will not come quietly. It will test us." Jake swallowed, his throat dry. "What do we do?" Tala stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she looked into the night. "We wait. We are not here to fight yet. The darkness is patient, but so are we." Jake wasn't sure what to expect, but he stayed silent, trusting her. He had learned by now that Tala's words were always measured, never rushed. There was wisdom in her silence, and though he didn't fully understand the nature of the battle she spoke of, he had come to believe in her strength. The minutes passed slowly, each second dragging on longer than the last. The forest was still, but Jake could feel the energy in the air shift. A low hum seemed to vibrate beneath his feet, and he glanced around, unease creeping up his spine. Suddenly, Tala's voice broke the stillness. "It is here." Jake turned to her, his eyes wide with confusion. "What is?" But before she could respond, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The trees swayed as though caught in an invisible storm, their branches creaking under an unseen pressure. A faint, unnatural light appeared in the distance, and Jake felt the hair on his neck stand up. Out of the shadows, figures began to emerge, tall, cloaked shapes that seemed to materialize from the darkness itself. Jake's breath caught in his throat. They were like nothing he had ever seen. Not human, but not entirely alien either. Their eyes glowed faintly, an eerie, unnatural hue, and their presence sent a chill through the air. Tala stepped forward, unafraid. "You are not welcome here," she called, her voice firm and powerful, carrying across the clearing. The figures didn't respond with words, but Jake could feel the weight of their gaze, the pressure of their presence. They moved slowly, methodically, like hunters closing in on their prey. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just a battle of strength. This was something else entirely, something he couldn't begin to comprehend. But Tala stood her ground, her back straight, her eyes locked on the figures that surrounded them. One of the figures, the tallest of them, stepped forward. Its voice was like a low growl, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the earth. "You cannot protect them, spirit of the land," it said, its voice dripping with malice. "We are the shadow that will consume this world." Tala's expression didn't change. "You are nothing but a fleeting illusion," she said calmly. "You have no power here." The figure let out a guttural laugh, its form shifting as though it were made of smoke. "We have no need for power," it sneered. "We are the darkness that exists beyond the veil. And soon you will join us." Jake couldn't move. He felt as though the air had thickened, pressing down on him from all sides. The ground beneath his feet seemed to shift, the earth itself trembling in response to the dark figure's presence. But then Tala moved. Her body seemed to radiate an energy that Jake couldn't explain, a force so strong that it pushed against the darkness like a light in the middle of a storm. She raised her arms, her voice rising in a chant that echoed through the clearing. The figures hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty passing through their glowing eyes. "Your darkness cannot exist here," Tala said, her voice steady and strong. "The spirits of this land will not allow it." The figures faltered, their forms wavering like smoke in the wind. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Tala's words had weakened them, as though the power of the land itself was pushing back against the darkness that had invaded it. Jake's heart surged with hope. Could they actually defeat these things? Could Tala truly stand against the darkness that had come for her people? But then, the leader of the figures raised its hand and the ground beneath them cracked open with a deafening sound. The earth trembled violently and Jake stumbled, falling to his knees. The clearing was engulfed in a blinding light, and for a moment, Jake couldn't see anything at all. Tala's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay strong, Jake," she called. "This is not the end." Through the blinding light, Jake could see her, standing tall, her form glowing with a power that he hadn't fully understood until now. It was as if she had become one with the land, her body radiating an energy so pure and powerful that it pushed back against the darkness, forcing it to retreat. The figures recoiled, their forms flickering and shuddering as though they were losing their grip on the world. The air grew thick with tension, and Jake could feel the power radiating from Tala, a force that seemed to grow stronger with each passing second. And then, with a final deafening cry, the figures dissolved, their forms dissipating into the night like smoke carried away by the wind. The forest fell silent. Jake slowly stood, his legs trembling beneath him as he looked at Tala. She was breathing heavily, but her expression was calm, her eyes still glowing faintly with the power she had channeled. "It is over," Tala said quietly, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her face. Jake looked around, still in shock. The darkness that had threatened them was gone, vanished without a trace. He felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was quickly replaced by a deep respect for the woman standing before him. Tala had done what no one else could have. She had protected her people and the land they both loved. "You did it," Jake said, his voice filled with awe. "You really did it." Tala nodded, but there was a weariness in her eyes. "The darkness will always return, Jake," she said softly. It is a force that cannot be destroyed. But as long as I stand, I will protect this land. And you too. Jake stepped forward, his heart full of gratitude. I'll stand with you, he said, his voice firm. Always. Tala smiled, the faintest flicker of warmth in her eyes. Then together we will keep the darkness at bay. And with that, they stood side by side, knowing that the battle was not over, but that together, they had the strength to face whatever came next.